Hi everyone, today we are going to work on TOEFL Integrated Essay. I will show you how to correctly summarize the discussion on Spartacus.
Want to master TOEFL writing, both integrated and academic discussion essays? Enroll in Dr. Burns' affordable self-study course. You'll get everything you need, plus free essay evaluations. Remember, AI can't check the strength of your arguments. This is key to scoring high. Get expert consultation from Dr. Burns to assess how strong your arguments are and whether you're on the right track. Don't miss out. Enroll today.
Let's start by skimming the passage to understand its key points. The passage introduces Spartacus as follows. Spartacus, the rebel leader who fought against the Romans with an army of fellow escaped slaves. From this, we learn that Spartacus was originally a Roman slave who became a rebel leader fighting against Rome. Later, the passage states, Spartacus led his men against their Roman oppressors and managed to defeat the Roman army in several battles. Eventually, Spartacus and his army were defeated and put to death. So we now know that Spartacus won some battles but ultimately failed and was killed. This gives us a short biography of who Spartacus was. Since not everyone is familiar with Spartacus, it's a good idea to briefly describe him in the introductory of your response. The main thesis of the reading is this. Several aspects about his story have made him a particularly appealing hero. Now let's examine the three key arguments in the passage. The passage states, Spartacus' original goal in his conflict against Rome is one everyone can empathize with. He wanted to return home. Spartacus and his men had been taken by the Romans from faraway land. In fighting the Romans, Spartacus and his men initially sought to return to the homeland from which they had been uprooted. This means that the first reason Spartacus is considered a heroic figure is his desire to return to his homeland. Why is this significant? Because he was taken from his home, wherever that may be, and forced into slavery. His attempt to return as a free man can be seen as an act of heroism. In understanding the difference between an essay that scores a 23 and one that scores a perfect 30, it's crucial to focus on the depth of analysis. A lower-scoring essay might mechanically state that Spartacus' goal of returning home was heroic. However, most readers should naturally question why simply returning home qualifies as a heroic act. The passage itself does not explicitly explain this point. Instead, it relies on vague phrases like everyone can empathize and we can all appreciate. But merely returning to one's homeland does not inherently make someone a hero. To elevate the essay's quality, we must flesh out why this goal is heroic. Upon closer examination, the reasoning becomes clear. Spartacus was not just any traveler returning home. He was a man who had been captured, enslaved, and taken to Roman territory. His desire to return was not a simple homecoming. It was a pursuit of freedom after oppression. A former slave striving to reclaim his homeland as a free person is what makes the goal heroic. An essay that scores a 30 will explicitly spell out this point, providing a logical and persuasive explanation. It will not assume that the reader automatically understands the significance of Spartacus' goal. Instead, it will make a compelling case, demonstrating that escaping from slavery and reclaiming one's homeland is a heroic achievement. This level of clarity and argumentation is what distinguishes a top-scoring essay from an average one. This is the second argument. Spartacus' initial success in fighting against the powerful Roman army has earned him the admiration people feel when someone who is unmatched triumphs through sheer skill. This argument claims that Spartacus had exceptional military skills. Despite leading a small, poorly equipped rebel group, he managed to defeat a large, well-financed, and highly trained Roman army multiple times. So Spartacus was a brilliant military leader is the second argument. Moving on to the third argument, the passage explains, in fighting against Rome, Spartacus sought to liberate all Roman slaves and thus commanded respect as an early human rights advocate. According to this argument, Spartacus wasn't just fighting for himself or his fellow prisoners. He wanted to free all Roman slaves. This makes him one of the earliest known figures advocating for human rights. The passage also mentions that before his final battle, a Roman general offered Spartacus a deal. If he stopped fighting, he would be made for a Roman senator. However, Spartacus rejected this offer because it would have allowed slavery to continue. This refusal is presented as proof of his commitment to justice. Now that we understand the reading passage, let's listen to the lecture and see how it responds to these claims. I will take notes while we listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
Spartacus was a real person who escaped from slavery and fought against the Romans. However, many stories that are told about the life of Spartacus are not historically accurate. The information in the reading relies on those inaccurate stories. First, returning to their homes overseas was not the only goal of Spartacus and his men. You see, those first battles in which Spartacus's army defeated the Roman army cleared a route by which Spartacus and his men could have escaped the Roman territory. But they didn't take that opportunity. Instead, Spartacus's men started marching towards the city of Rome. They probably wanted to conquer the city and take as many valuables from the Romans as they could. So Spartacus was not fighting just to get home. He was interested in revenge and wealth, and those are less admirable goals. Second, although Spartacus did win a few battles, he was not necessarily a military genius. What really happened was, the Romans didn't take Spartacus and his army very seriously at first, so they initially sent only poorly trained and ill-equipped army units to put down the revolt. It was these weak units that Spartacus defeated. When the Roman army sent their best soldiers, Spartacus was quickly defeated, suggesting that Spartacus wasn't a brilliant military leader. Third, the story that Spartacus wanted to liberate all Roman slaves is not backed by historical evidence either. So where did the story come from? Well, we know exactly who created this story and why. It happened in 18th century Europe. 18th century Europeans widely practiced slavery themselves, but there was also an anti-slavery movement, thinkers and writers who were strongly opposed to slavery. People in the anti-slavery movement wanted to have an inspirational hero from ancient times, and they thought Spartacus could be that hero. And so an 18th century playwright wrote a play in which Spartacus fought to liberate all slaves. But it was just an inspirational story in a play, not the historical truth.
Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they challenge the specific points made in the reading passage.
Now that we have the arguments and counter-arguments about Spartacus' heroism, let's structure the essay. Since we have only 20 minutes to write, keep the introduction short, so you can cover all the key details in the three arguments. The rater will primarily evaluate whether you summarize the arguments accurately and comprehensively. So I will start simply. The discussion is about whether Spartacus was a hero. Then I will add a brief description of who he was. The discussion is about whether Spartacus, a Roman slave who led a rebellion against the Roman army, was a hero. Next, I will summarize the opposing positions. While the article claims Spartacus was an admirable hero, the professor disagrees, arguing that these claims are based on historically inaccurate facts. And the following is the body of your essay.
The article presents the first reason to view Spartacus as a hero. His rebel army fought against the Romans to return to their homeland. This is considered heroic because Spartacus and his men had been taken from their native lands and forced into slavery in Roman territory. However, the professor questions this motivation. He points out that after winning several battles, Spartacus and his men had the opportunity to return to their homeland, but they didn't take it. Instead, they marched toward Rome, likely intending to conquer and plunder the city. This suggests that Spartacus's true intention was revenge and wealth, which is hardly heroic. The article also argues that Spartacus was an exceptional military strategist. His small rebel force managed to defeat the well-financed and highly trained Roman army multiple times, making him worthy of being considered a hero. The professor, however, rebuts this claim. He explains that Spartacus' early victories were not due to military brilliance, but rather because the Romans underestimated him. Initially, Rome sent weak, poorly equipped troops to suppress the rebellion. Once the Romans deployed their best soldiers, Spartacus was quickly defeated. This suggests that he was not a military genius. The article's third claim is that Spartacus fought to abolish slavery itself, not just for his own freedom. As evidence, the article states that Spartacus rejected an offer to become a senator in exchange for stopping his fight against Rome. This would certainly portray him as a hero, making him one of history's earliest human rights advocates. However, the professor strongly disputes this idea. He argues that there is no historical evidence to support the claim that Spartacus fought to free all slaves. The story of Spartacus as a liberator originated in 18th century Europe during a time when slavery was widespread but facing growing opposition. Anti-slavery activists sought an inspirational hero, so a playwright created the narrative of Spartacus as a champion of justice. However, this was a fictionalized account, not historical fact.